Hi there, and welcome to the Date Files. She's out there, searching for the right man, and all she's encountered are unemployed, liars, or men trying to cop a feel. They all have been a disaster, as she continues her endless search in the hopes that the right dude is out there.
Hello and welcome to the Date Files. The Date Files is the podcast where I bring you the funny, hilarious, and downright disastrous tales of dating in today's world. Last week we talked about Mr. Foreclosure. This week is a special one, Mr. Sci-Fi. Well, Mr. Sci-Fi could also be like Mr. D&D, Mr. Nerd, like any of those stereotypical nerdy things that when you think of like nerdy things, like your Dungeons and Dragons, your sci-fi, your Star Wars, your Star Trek, any of those, because he adored them all. And when I say adored, that's an understatement. So Mr. Sci-Fi guy, he was about 10 years older. He lived about a half hour away. Let's see. He says he was divorced and he was living in some shack in the middle of nowhere on someone's property. At one point he said it was his boss's property, and then he said it was his dad's property. So I'm not quite sure that dynamic there. But yeah, so somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Like no running water nowhere. Our first date, we met at a local hamburger place, and it was decent. He knew the waitresses by name, and he was very friendly with all the waitresses, so I'm assuming that's his, like, normal hangout. For his profession, he was a bus driver, like the chartered buses and stuff like that. First day was well. We talked about books and everything that he adores, like the sci-fi and Star Wars stuff. I'm not big into that, so the conversation wasn't too in-depth on those topics. But when we started talking about other books, we were very compatible. We talked about like The Alchemist, The Search for Meaning of Life, and other things like that. So other books we were very compatible on. Things in general we were compatible on. So I did agree to do a second date with him. The second date was movies. I'm not a fan of the movies as dates because you can't talk to people when you're in the movie theater. So not the greatest date, but we are kind of limited in the area. So nonetheless, we went to the movies. We were talking on a daily basis, texting throughout the day. He was texting me while he was at work. Some things at work kind of bothered me. Like there was one lady that he was uber friendly with, and they're buying each other drinks, buying each other's dinners and stuff like that. So that one was a little worried. I'm like, Mike, is this more than a friendship? Because the way he talked about her definitely seemed like it was. But he said no, so we were taking him for his word on that one. We have a couple more dates, and things are going well. One thing I do have a red flag or kind of a hesitation on is cats. He has 3 cats, and he talks to them, like when we were on the phone, like he would talk to them like they had actually talked back. It was kind of weird. Like I get talking to your dogs and cats or whatever, but this was a whole new level of weird talking to your cats. So there was one date that I planned for him because I wanted to take him someplace special. So why I do all these fancy planning dates is beyond me. But I was taking him to the Getty. So I picked him up in the middle of nowhere on his dad's boss's who knows property. And then I have it as a surprise because I didn't want to tell him he's never been. He's a big art history buff and stuff like that. So we go to the Getty Center. He's like completely in awe at the Getty Center. He's loving it. So it's cute. So this was like our 4th or 5th date by the time then. We still hadn't kissed. So like we weren't even really holding hands at that point. So that was kind of weird. So the second surprise I had for him after the Getty was taking him to, in Los Angeles, a place called The Last Bookstore. It is a huge bookstore, and if you've never been to the bookstore, I highly do suggest you go to the bookstore. It was fabulous. I mean, so many books. And I do believe they moved recently, so it's no longer downtown Los Angeles right next to the convention center. So they did move, I do believe. But anyways, great place to go. Great date. He ended up spending like $150 in books. most of them Star Trek, Star Wars books, I believe. So I go to drop him off. He asks if I want to come in. So I come in. Place is very small, kind of dirty, kind of messy. Cats definitely had the cat litter box smell. So that was kind of a turnoff. But we turn on the TV and everything's in his ex-wife's name. So I ask him about the names on the Roku, Netflix, everything's in her name. He says, yes, I pay all of her bills. Everything's in her name still. The phones are still in her name. Everything like that. And I'm like, how long have you been divorced? And he says like 5 years. So I'm like, okay, so why are you still paying for all of her stuff? He says, well, she's in a mental institute, and so he still has to pay for everything. And I was like, so you're divorced? And he's like, he swears up and down he's divorced. I'm not buying it. After a few more conversations, digging a little deeper, I did do my research on him. I couldn't find anything that said they were officially divorced. He says, he will always talk to her. He takes her calls. Like every week she calls, he calls her. They email on a daily basis, whatever. But she's in a mental institute. So I'm thinking, okay, so he's having a little fun while his wife is in a mental institute. So there was some little weirdness there. He starts bringing up his wife often. Like every other time we talk, we went on a couple more dates. He says, oh, I can't do stuff because I have to go visit his ex. He has to go visit the ex-wife. It's his monthly visit or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know many people that visit their ex-wives or ex-husbands if they've been divorced for 5 years. So I eventually did kind of break it off with him. He called me a few choice names. Nothing I haven't heard before, like the things that rhyme with witch and stuff like that, because I can't deal with him having an ex-wife that he still talks to. Not it at all. So we say our goodbyes. Like a month and a half, 2 months goes by. He sends me a text saying, he misses me. He wants to, he's going to be in my area. He asks if I would come and see him while he's working on his break. He asks if I can bring him some water because he didn't bring any water, whatever. So I'm like, fine. So me being the nice person I am, I take him a bottle of water. We talk for a few minutes. He says he was sorry for how he acted. He does see my point of view, whatever. So he asks if we can go on another date and try to seeing how things could go. So I reluctantly agreed because we did have some good conversations. He was fun to talk to. So our next date is a super fancy date. We get dressed up in he's wearing a tuxedo. I'm wearing an evening gown. It's a really fancy restaurant. It's great. Afterwards, we drive around town. We go up and see the stars from a little mountain point. It was actually a really nice, elegant date. So we talk, and he asks if I want to go back to his place to go watch a movie. We watch a movie, and he says, "Look," he's like, things are no longer in the ex-wife's names." He did see the ways of that, so he did change things, and I'm like, okay, you just changed who's the number one profile. Did you really change it? Whatever. So things are looking better. At least he's making an attempt to not look like he's so not over his ex-wife or current wife, whoever, I don't know. So we do have a couple more dates after that. Nothing spectacular. Still really hadn't kissed. I don't know why I find those people that don't like to kiss or any kind of PDAs, but I'm in no rush to jump into that stuff. So that's okay. But then one night, I don't know if we were joking or what happened, but something set him off and he got on a soapbox about something, and we were I wasn't even trying to disagree with him. I was just like, okay. And I was trying to be just quiet because he was irate over, I don't even remember the topic. And he's calling me every name in the book. I'm narcissist. I'm a C word. I'm a B word. And I was just like, wow. I was like, never in my life have I ever been called so many names by someone who's trying to date me. I tell him, hey, look, we're done because I'm not going to sit here and have you call me every name in the book when I've done nothing wrong. When you're the one that is still married And I just throw it out there, and he's like, leave her out of this. He's like, we don't even get to see each other that much. She's in a mental institute. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're still married. I'm like, you are not emotionally over her if you guys are divorced. I was like, there's a whole bunch of issues that you need to go fix on that end. So it ended that night in a very heated blowout, and I wasn't even heated. At that point, he says, that he's going to offend me and everything. And I was like, look, honey, I don't get offended easily. I was like, it takes a lot to offend me. He's like, oh, all of this stuff. So we ended it. And then he starts texting me like all of these weird, like very passive aggressive messages. And I tell him, please stop calling me. Please stop texting me. Obviously, you like this passive aggressive stuff. I was like, we are not going to be a match, because if someone doesn't have your viewpoint, you get on a soapbox and you turn irate. I was like, I don't know, maybe this is normal for you, but I don't do this passive aggressive secret hostility thing and holding grudges. So another one bites the dust, and that one was pretty bad. So that one ended. And so as I say every week, I didn't think it could get worse, but as you see, it clearly does. Next week, guy, is only fitting because it's another cat story. So next week, we are calling him Mr. Catbox. It's actually lack of Mr. Catbox, because there was no Catbox, or shouldn't have been. So stay tuned for next week to see why he gets the name Mr. Catbox. As always, email me your horror story so you can be featured on an upcoming episode. I'd love to chat and see how your dating stories compare to mine. Maybe it's me, maybe it's an anomaly, I don't know. So email me. The email will be listed in the show notes and stuff like that. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe, my lovelies, and happy dating.